If I slap you right now, that sickness will leave your body. The fluorescent lights of St. Catherine's Hospital buzzed like angry hornets above Victor Corleone's head, and for the first time in 15 years, he couldn't make them stop. He couldn't make anything stop. Not the trembling in his hands. Not the fever burning through his veins like liquid fire. Not the humiliation of being horizontal in a hospital bed when he should have been vertical, commanding, untouchable. Victor Corleone didn't do weakness. He'd built an empire on the principle that weakness was a disease, and diseases were for other people. Lesser people. The kind who worked 9-to-5 jobs and worried about mortgage payments and whether their boss liked them. Victor had never worried about whether anyone liked him. Fear was better than affection. More reliable. More profitable. But tonight, fear couldn't help him. The pain had started 3 days ago, a sharp, twisting sensation in his abdomen that he'd ignored with the same casual dismissal he applied to everything that displeased him. By day 2, his second-in-command, Dmitri, had noticed the sweat on his brow during a meeting with the Yakuza representatives. By day 3, Victor had collapsed in his office, and even his legendary stubbornness couldn't convince his body to stand back up. "Boss, you need a hospital," Dmitri had said, his thick Russian accent heavy with worry. "I need," Victor had hissed through gritted teeth, "for you to shut your mouth and get me something for the pain." But the pain had won. It always did, eventually. Even empires fell. Even kings bled. Now here he was, trapped in a pale blue hospital gown that barely covered his dignity, surrounded by walls the color of defeat, with 4 needles stuck in his arm like a white flag of surrender. The room smelled of antiseptic and something else, something that reminded him of mortality. He hated it. He hated all of it. But what he hated most was the waiting. Victor Corleone didn't wait for anyone. People waited for him. They waited in fear, in anticipation, in desperate hope that he might grant them a moment of his attention. But now he was the one waiting, for doctors who moved too slowly, for test results that took too long, for relief that seemed to mock him from just beyond reach. The door opened, and a young nurse entered. She was small, maybe 5'4", with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that held something Victor didn't see often, complete and utter lack of fear. She carried a chart and moved with the efficient grace of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. "Mr. Corleone," she said, her voice professionally neutral. "I need to check your vitals." "What I need," Victor growled, his voice rough with pain and fury, "is for someone to tell me what the hell is wrong with me. I've been in this godforsaken place for 3 hours, and all anyone does is poke me with needles and ask stupid questions." The nurse, her name tag read Elena Wick, didn't flinch. She wrapped the blood pressure cuff around his arm with steady hands. "The doctor will be with you once we have your test results," she said calmly. "Your vitals look—" "I don't care what my vitals look like." Victor's voice rose to the volume he used in boardrooms and back alleys, the voice that made grown men reconsider their life choices. "I want answers, and I want them now." Elena paused, her hand still on the blood pressure monitor. For a moment, Victor thought he'd finally gotten through to her, that she'd scurry away and return with someone more senior, someone who understood that Victor Corleone was not a man you kept waiting. Instead, she met his eyes directly. "Yelling won't make your gallbladder feel better, Mr. Corleone," she said, her tone maddeningly even. "But it might rupture your appendix if that's what's actually wrong with you. So I'd suggest you save your energy for healing instead of intimidation." Victor's mouth fell open slightly. In his entire adult life, no one, not rival gang leaders, not federal prosecutors, not even his own mother, had spoken to him like that. Like he was just another patient. Just another man. "Do you know who I am?" The question came out quieter than he intended, tinged with genuine disbelief. "A man with acute abdominal pain and a blood pressure that's climbing into dangerous territory," Elena replied, noting something on her chart. "That's all I need to know." She turned to leave, and Victor felt something unfamiliar twist in his chest alongside the physical pain. Was it anger? No, he knew anger intimately. This was something else. Something closer to confusion? Respect? No. Impossible. "Wait," he called out, surprising himself. Elena paused at the door, looking back over her shoulder. In the harsh fluorescent light, Victor noticed things he'd missed before, the faint shadows under her eyes that spoke of long shifts, the slight tension in her jaw that suggested she dealt with difficult patients regularly, the unwavering steadiness in her gaze that made him wonder what kind of life created that level of composure. "What?" she asked, not rudely, but not deferentially either. For the first time in years, Victor Corleone didn't know what to say. The pain in his gut twisted sharper, and he grimaced, his hand instinctively moving to his abdomen. Elena's expression softened slightly, not with pity, but with professional concern. "I'll tell the doctor you need pain management," she said. "Try to rest." Then she was gone, and Victor was alone again with his pain, his pride, and a question that echoed louder than the buzzing lights. Who the hell was Elena Wick, and why couldn't he stop thinking about the way she'd looked at him, not with fear, but with something far more unsettling? Like he was human. Victor Corleone had built his empire on understanding people. Knowing their weaknesses, their fears, their breaking points. But as he lay in that sterile hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles and counting the minutes until Elena returned, though he'd never admit he was counting, he realized he understood nothing about the woman who'd just walked out of his room. The pain medication they'd finally given him dulled the physical agony to a manageable throb, but it did nothing for the strange restlessness that had settled into his bones. Victor had spent the last 15 years becoming a man people whispered about. A man whose name carried weight in rooms he'd never entered. He'd climbed from the streets of Brooklyn, where poverty had teeth and hunger had a face, to a penthouse overlooking Central Park where silence cost more than most people's yearly salary. His father had died when Victor was 12, a construction accident that was really a mob execution disguised as bad luck. His mother had cleaned houses until her hands bled, whispering prayers in Italian that God never seemed to hear. Victor had learned early that prayers were for people who had time to wait. He didn't have time. He had rage, ambition, and a willingness to do what others wouldn't. By 25, he owned 3 nightclubs. By 30, he controlled half the docks in New Jersey. By 35, politicians returned his calls before their constituents. He'd never married. Marriage was a weakness, a hostage to fortune. He'd never had children. Children were vulnerabilities waiting to be exploited. He'd built his life like a fortress, impenetrable, isolated, safe. And lonely, whispered a voice he usually kept buried deep. He silenced it the way he silenced everything inconvenient, with force of will. The door opened again, but this time it wasn't Elena. It was Dr. Harrison Gatsby, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and the kind of calm demeanor that came from 30 years of delivering bad news. Behind him stood Elena, chart in hand, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Corleone," Dr. Gatsby said, pulling up a chair with the ease of someone who'd learned that sitting made difficult conversations slightly less difficult. "We have your test results." Finally, Victor muttered. "What's the damage?" "Acute cholecystitis. Your gallbladder is severely inflamed and showing signs of infection. We need to remove it, tonight, ideally. The surgery is relatively routine, but given the infection, we can't wait." Victor processed this information with the same cold calculation he applied to business deals. "How long is recovery?" 4 to 6 weeks for full recovery. 2 weeks minimum before you can return to work. Dr. Gatsby's slight pause before work suggested he knew exactly what Victor's work entailed. Unacceptable. Victor started to sit up, ignoring the protest from his abdomen. "I have meetings, obligations." "You have an infected organ that could rupture and kill you," Elena cut in, her voice sharp enough to stop Victor mid-movement. "Your meetings won't matter if you're dead, Mr. Corleone." Dr. Gatsby glanced at Elena with something between surprise and approval. Victor glared at her with something between fury and fascination. "Elena," Dr. Gatsby said gently, "perhaps you could prep OR2 for Mr. Corleone's procedure." "Of course, doctor." Elena's eyes never left Victor's face. "Try not to do anything stupid before we cut you open." She left before Victor could respond, the door swinging shut behind her with finality. Dr. Gatsby chuckled softly. "Elena's one of our best nurses. She's also the only one who volunteered to be assigned to you after word spread about your demeanor." "My demeanor?" Victor's tone could have frozen water. "You've shouted at 3 nurses, 2 orderlies, and a medical student in the past hour," Dr. Gatsby said mildly. "Most people don't volunteer for that kind of treatment." "Elena did. Said she'd dealt with worse." Victor found himself curious despite his anger. Worse than me. She worked trauma nursing in Chicago for 5 years before transferring here. Gang violence, mostly. Lost her younger brother to a drive-by shooting 3 years ago. Dr. Gatsby stood, checking something on Victor's chart. So when I say she's dealt with worse, I mean she's watched 17-year-old kids bleed out on her table while gang leaders, men not unlike yourself, Mr. Corleone, stood in her ER demanding she save their soldiers while showing no remorse for creating the violence in the first place. The words landed like punches, each one precise and devastating. Victor felt something crack in his chest, not physically, but somewhere deeper, in the place where he kept the parts of himself he didn't like to examine. I didn't know, he said quietly, and immediately hated himself for the weakness in his voice. You didn't ask, Dr. Gatsby replied, not unkindly. Most people don't. We'll have you prepped for surgery within the hour. I suggest you use that time to think about who you want notified as your emergency contact. After the doctor left, Victor lay in the silence, which suddenly felt heavier than before. He thought about Elena Wick, a woman who'd lost her brother to violence and still chose to save lives. A woman who looked at him and saw not a king, but a patient. Not a threat, but a man. His phone buzzed on the bedside table. Dimitri. Boss, how bad is it? Surgery tonight. I'll be out of commission for a few weeks. A pause. You want me to handle the... No. Put everything on hold. Nothing moves until I'm back. Boss, the Delgado situation won't wait. They're pushing into our territory. If we don't respond, then they push. Victor surprised himself with the words. I'm not making decisions from a hospital bed, Dimitri. Tell everyone I'm out of the country. Buy me time. You sure? Was he? Victor looked at the four in his arm, thought about Elena's brother bleeding out while men like him stood by. Thought about his mother's prayers. Thought about the fortress he'd built and how empty it felt when you were alone inside it. I'm sure. And Dimitri? The Delgado thing, find a way to negotiate. Not everything needs to be a war. Who are you and what have you done with my boss? Dimitri tried to joke, but there was genuine confusion in his voice. Just do it. I'll call you after surgery. Victor ended the call and closed his eyes. The pain medication was making him drowsy, but his mind kept circling back to Elena. To the way she'd looked at him, not with fear or even hatred, but with exhausting patience, like he was a child throwing a tantrum and she was the adult who'd seen it all before. For 15 years, Victor had commanded respect through fear. In 15 minutes, Elena Wick had commanded his attention through simple, unflinching honesty. The door opened one more time. Elena, now in surgical scrubs, her hair covered by a blue cap. We're ready for you, she said. Any questions before we take you to pre-op? Victor looked at her, really looked at her this time. Noticed the strength in the set of her shoulders. The compassion that lingered in her eyes despite everything she'd seen. The courage it took to walk back into this room when she knew he'd be difficult. Why'd you volunteer to be my nurse? He asked. Elena considered the question, her head tilting slightly. Because everyone deserves care, Mr. Corleone. Even the ones who don't think they need it. Even the ones who make it difficult. Especially them, actually. Your brother, Victor said carefully. Dr. Gatsby told me. I'm sorry for your loss. Something flickered across Elena's face, surprise, maybe, or pain that had learned to hide itself well. Thank you. That's the first kind thing you've said since you got here. I'm not kind, Victor said automatically. No, Elena agreed, moving to unlock his bed's wheels. But maybe you could try. Just for the next few hours. Think of it as practice. As she wheeled him toward the operating room, Victor Corleone, a man who'd spent 15 years being feared, found himself wanting something far more complicated and terrifying than respect. He wanted Elena Wick to not hate him. And he had no idea how to make that happen. The operating room was colder than Victor expected. Bright lights, gleaming instruments, masked faces that looked at him like he was already unconscious, just another body on a table. The anesthesiologist introduced himself as Dr. Park, explained the procedure in a soothing voice designed to calm nervous patients. Victor wasn't nervous. Or so he told himself. But when Elena appeared at his side, adjusting his fall line with practiced efficiency, His heart rate monitor betrayed him with a slight spike. Nervous? She asked, noticing the readout. No, Victor lied. It's okay if you are. Surgery is scary, even routine ones. Her gloved hand rested briefly on his shoulder, a gesture of comfort so natural he wondered if she even realized she'd done it. Dr. Gatsby is excellent. You're in good hands. What about your hands? The question came out before Victor could stop it, his filter weakened by pre-surgical anxiety and whatever they'd given him to relax. Elena's eyes crinkled above her mask, a smile he couldn't see but could feel. My hands will be there too. I'm scrubbing in on your surgery. Why? Victor asked, his tongue feeling thick. The medication was kicking in. Because someone needs to make sure you don't insult Dr. Gatsby while he's holding a scalpel near your vital organs. Her tone was teasing, gentle in a way no one had been gentle with him in years. Elena, he said, fighting the drowsiness that was pulling him under like a tide. If something goes wrong. Nothing will go wrong. But if it does, his words were slurring now, the room spinning softly. Tell Dimitri, tell him the Delgado thing, negotiate. No more blood. No more kids bleeding out. He was talking about her brother, he realized distantly. About all the brothers. All the violence he'd caused, directly or indirectly, in his climb to power. Mr. Corleone, Victor. Elena's voice was close to his ear now, anchoring him as consciousness slipped away. You're going to be fine. And when you wake up, you can tell Dimitri yourself. You called me Victor, he mumbled, and then the world went black. Victor woke to pain. Not the screaming agony from before, but a deep, surgical ache that reminded him his body had been opened and stitched back together. His mouth was dry, his thoughts foggy. Voices swam above him, urgent, worried voices that didn't match the routine procedure he'd been promised. Blood pressure dropping. Get him stabilized. Internal bleeding, we need to. Elena's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. Doctor, his pressure is critical. We're losing him. Losing him? Victor tried to open his eyes, tried to speak, but his body wouldn't respond. He was floating somewhere between consciousness and void, listening to people fight for his life while he couldn't even lift a finger to help. Elena, type and cross-match for transfusion, now. Dr. Gatsby's voice was controlled urgency. His hemorrhaging from the hepatic artery. This shouldn't have happened. Doesn't matter what should have happened, Elena responded, her voice steady despite the crisis. What do you need? Victor felt hands on him, pressure on his abdomen, the sting of new 4 lines. He wanted to tell them to save their energy, that men like him didn't deserve the effort. He'd spent 15 years building an empire on other people's suffering. Maybe this was karma. Maybe Elena's brother was watching from somewhere, finally getting justice. But then he heard it, Elena's voice, closer now, speaking directly to him even though he couldn't respond. Don't you dare die on me, Victor Corleone. You hear me? We had a deal. You were going to practice being kind. You can't practice if you're dead, and I don't accept quitters in my OR. Her hand gripped his, warm, alive, fierce. Fight, she commanded. I know you're a fighter. You built an empire, you can survive a surgery complication. Fight. And despite everything, despite the blood loss and the failing vitals and the very real possibility that he was dying, Victor fought. For Elena. For the chance to wake up and see her eyes without fear in them. For the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he could be someone different than who he'd been. The darkness pulled at him, but he pulled back harder. When Victor finally surfaced from unconsciousness, the first thing he saw was fluorescent lights. The second thing was Elena, asleep in a chair beside his bed, still in her surgical scrubs, her hair escaping from her cap in dark wisps around her face. She looked exhausted. Beautiful. Real. He tried to speak, but only managed a rough croak. Elena's eyes snapped open immediately, nurse instincts, he guessed. She was on her feet in an instant, checking his monitors, her hand automatically reaching for his pulse at his wrist. Welcome back, she said softly. You gave us quite a scare. How long? His voice sounded like gravel. 12 hours since surgery. You had a complication, arterial bleeding. We almost lost you. She said it matter-of-factly, but he caught the tremor in her hand as she adjusted his fall. You coded once on the table. Victor processed this. He'd died. Technically, clinically, he'd died. And Elena had brought him back. You stayed, he observed, looking at her rumpled scrubs, the exhaustion etched into her features. My shift ended 8 hours ago. She shrugged, avoiding his eyes. I wanted to make sure you woke up. Why? Elena finally looked at him, and in her eyes he saw something that made his battered heart skip, genuine concern. Not the calculated concern of subordinates wanting to stay in his good graces. Not the fearful concern of people worried about his retaliation. Real, human worry. Because you told me about negotiating with the Delgados. About no more blood. About kids not bleeding out. She sat back down in her chair, suddenly looking vulnerable herself. In all my years of trauma nursing, I've never heard someone like you, someone who profits from violence, talk about stopping it. I needed to know if you meant it, or if it was just the anesthesia talking. Victor's throat tightened. I meant it. Why? Now it was her turn to ask. Because, Victor said slowly, testing out honesty like a foreign language, you looked at me and didn't see a king. You saw a man. A flawed, difficult, arrogant man, but still just a man. And when I died on that table, his voice cracked. I realized I'd spent 15 years building an empire where no one could see me. Really see me. Except you did. In one day, you saw me clearer than anyone has in 15 years. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Outside his window, dawn was breaking over the city, pink and gold light spilling across buildings where people were just starting their days, unaware that in this hospital room, something fundamental had shifted. You know what I see when I look at you now? Elena asked finally. What? Someone who has a choice. You survived, Victor. You got a second chance. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Before he could answer, the door burst open. Dmitri rushed in, his usually composed face showing raw relief. Behind him stood 3 of Victor's men, all looking deeply uncomfortable in the hospital setting. Boss. Thank God. Dmitri approached the bed, then seemed to remember Elena's presence and stopped awkwardly. The doctors said you had complications. We've been out there all night. The Delgado situation, Victor interrupted. Tell me you negotiated like I asked. Dmitri exchanged glances with the other men. Boss, about that. They made a move while you were in surgery. Hit one of our shipments, took out 2 of our guys. The crew wants blood. They're waiting on your orders to retaliate. Victor felt the familiar pull of old patterns, the rage, the need to respond with overwhelming force, to remind everyone why you didn't touch Victor Corleone's operations. His empire demanded it. His reputation required it. But then he looked at Elena, who was watching him with those unflinching eyes. Waiting to see which version of Victor Corleone would emerge from this hospital bed, the king who solved problems with violence, or the man who'd promised no more blood. Tell the crew to stand down, Victor said quietly. Boss. Dmitri looked genuinely shocked. I said stand down. I want a meeting with Delgado. Neutral territory. No weapons, no threats. We negotiate like businessmen, not animals. They killed 2 of ours. And I've killed dozens of theirs over the years, Victor snapped. Where does it end, Dmitri? When we're all dead. When nurses like Elena have to watch more brothers bleed out because men like us can't figure out how to share a city. The room fell silent. Victor's men stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Elena's hand, he noticed, had moved to cover her mouth, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You really mean this, Dmitri said slowly. This isn't the medication talking. I died on that table, Victor said, his voice rough with emotion. For 6 minutes, I was gone. And you know what I thought about in those 6 minutes? Not my empire. Not my money. Not my reputation. I thought about a nurse who lost her brother to men like me, and I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I could be the one who stops the cycle instead of perpetuating it. He looked at Elena directly now. So yes, I mean it. Set up the meeting with Delgado. Tell him Victor Corleone wants to talk peace. And if he laughs, tell him I'm dying anyway, might as well try something different. You're not dying, Elena said firmly, wiping at her eyes. Your prognosis is good. You'll be fine. Then I'll live long enough to be better, Victor replied. Dimitri shook his head in disbelief but pulled out his phone. I'll make the call. But boss, if this goes sideways. It won't. Because I'm not the same man who walked into this hospital yesterday. Victor's eyes never left Elena's face. That man was already dying. He just didn't know it yet. After his men filed out, confused, worried, but loyal enough to follow orders, Elena stood to leave as well. Wait, Victor called. When can I get out of here? Dr. Gatsby wants to monitor you for at least a week, given the complications. Then several weeks of recovery at home. And will you be my nurse? During the recovery? Elena paused at the door, something complicated crossing her face. I could arrange for a home health nurse if. I don't want a home health nurse. I want you. Why? She asked for the third time that morning. Because you're the only person who's ever told me the truth. Even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Victor struggled to sit up slightly, wincing at the pain. You said if you slapped me, my sickness would leave my body. Well, you didn't slap me, but you did something worse. You made me see myself clearly. And I can't go back to who I was before that. I won't. Elena studied him for a long moment, and Victor felt like he was being evaluated more thoroughly than any doctor's examination. 1 week here, she finally said. Then we'll see about the rest. But Victor? If you go back on what you just said, if you revert to the violence and the cruelty, I'm done. I don't care how powerful you are. I've watched too many men throw away second chances. I won't enable another one. I won't, Victor promised, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Good. She moved back to his bedside and did something that shocked him. She gently squeezed his hand. Then rest. Practice being kind starts with being kind to yourself. Let your body heal. As she left the room, Victor stared at his hand where she'd touched him, feeling the warmth that lingered there. In 15 years of building an empire, he'd never felt anything as powerful as that simple gesture of faith. Outside his window, the sun continued to rise. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Victor Corleone felt something that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. Hope. The next 3 days blurred together in a rhythm Victor had never experienced: vulnerability. Elena checked on him every few hours, monitoring vitals, changing dressings, administering medication. But she also did something unexpected. She talked to him. Really talked. Tell me about your mother, she said on day 2, adjusting his pillows. Victor blinked, surprised. Why? Because Dr. Gatsby says your emergency contact list is empty except for Dimitri. No family. That seems lonely. My mother died 6 years ago, Victor said quietly. Cancer. I paid for the best treatment, but... He trailed off, the familiar guilt rising. I wasn't there when she died. I was closing a deal in Miami. Elena's hand stilled on his foreline. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was my choice. Empire over everything, remember? The bitterness in his voice surprised even him. Was it worth it? Elena asked softly. Victor looked at her, at this woman who'd lost her brother but still chose compassion, who worked double shifts and stayed by bedsides and believed people could change. No, he admitted. It wasn't. The honesty felt like shedding armor he'd worn so long he'd forgotten it was heavy. By day 4, the Delgado meeting was set. Dimitri arrived with updates, his expression still wary. Delgado agreed to meet. Tomorrow, neutral ground, that Italian place on 5th Street. But boss, the crew is restless. They think you've gone soft. Let them think it, Victor said, then caught Elena entering with his medication. Actually, tell them their boss nearly died and got smart instead. There's a difference between soft and strategic. Elena smiled at that, a real smile that made Victor's healing chest ache in a different way. After Dimitri left, she sat in her usual chair. You're really doing this? The peace thing? You sound surprised. I am. Most people talk about change. Few actually do it. She studied him with those penetrating eyes. What happens if Delgado refuses? If he sees your peace offer as weakness? Then I adapt. But I try negotiation first. Victor met her gaze. You asked what I'd do with my second chance. I'm showing you. Something shifted in Elena's expression, walls coming down, inch by cautious inch. My brother's name was Thomas. He was 17, wanted to be a doctor. Her voice was steady but her hands trembled slightly. He was caught in crossfire between two gangs fighting over territory. Neither side even apologized. Victor felt the words like physical blows. Elena. I need you to understand what's at stake, she continued. If you go back to that life, if this is just a temporary change because you got scared, you'll create more Thomases. More sisters like me. Can you live with that? No, Victor said with absolute certainty. I can't. Not anymore. The silence between them felt charged, fragile, like something precious that could shatter with the wrong word. I have tomorrow off, Elena said suddenly. After your meeting with Delgado. If it goes well, maybe you'd want company? For dinner here, I mean. Hospital food, but still. Victor's heart, freshly repaired and still healing, skipped. You asking me on a date, no Swick. I'm asking if you'd like someone to celebrate with. If you actually pull off making peace with a rival gang leader. She stood, professional mask sliding back into place, but he caught the hint of a smile. Don't let it go to your head. Too late, Victor said, and for the first time in 15 years, he meant it as a good thing. That night, alone in his room, Victor stared at the ceiling and realized something terrifying. He wasn't just trying to change for redemption or legacy. He was trying to change for Elena. To be worthy of the way she looked at him when she thought he might actually become someone better. And he wanted it more than he'd ever wanted power. The meeting with Rafael Delgado was set for noon. Victor insisted on going despite Dr. Gatsby's protests and Elena's concerned frown. Dimitri had arranged everything. The restaurant was closed to the public, security swept for weapons, exits mapped. Old habits died hard, even when pursuing peace. Victor moved slowly, his surgical sight protesting every step. Elena had helped him dress that morning, her hands clinical yet gentle as she checked his bandages beneath the expensive suit Dimitri had brought. You don't have to do this today, she'd said quietly. You're still healing. If I wait, more people might die, Victor had replied. Including me, if my crew decides a weak boss is worse than no boss. Now, sitting across from Rafael Delgado in a private room of Marino's Italian restaurant, Victor studied his rival. Delgado was younger than expected, mid-30s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of controlled energy that came from surviving in a world that ate the weak. He looked at Victor with undisguised suspicion. You look like death warmed over, Corleone, Delgado said, not bothering with pleasantries. I was, Victor replied calmly. Died on an operating table 4 days ago. Gives you perspective. Or makes you weak. Delgado leaned back, arms crossed. Your people hit 3 of my distribution points last month. Killed 5 of my men. And now you want to talk peace because you had surgery? Forgive me if I'm not moved. Victor felt Dimitri tense beside him, but he raised a hand slightly, a signal to stand down. You're right. I started this war. And before that, I started a dozen others. Built my empire on the bodies of men like yours. He paused, letting the admission hang in the air. But I'm offering to end it. Genuinely. No tricks, no traps. Just 2 businessmen dividing a city without more bloodshed. Why? Delgado's eyes narrowed. Men like you don't change. What's the real play here? There's a nurse at St. Catherine's Hospital, Victor said, surprising himself with the honesty. Her name is Elena Wick. 3 years ago, her 17-year-old brother was killed in crossfire between 2 gangs fighting over territory. He wanted to be a doctor. He died because men like us couldn't share. Delgado's expression flickered, something that might have been pain. Elena saved my life, Victor continued. And when I woke up, she asked me what I was going to do with my second chance. I realized I had 2 choices. Go back to building an empire on corpses, or try to be the man who stops creating orphans and grieving sisters. Poetic, Delgado said flatly. But words don't bring back the dead. No, Victor agreed. But they can prevent more death. I'm proposing we split distribution territories. You take the North Docks, I keep the South. We establish neutral zones for business, and any disputes go through arbitration, not bullets. You want a piece of my casino operations? We negotiate percentages like civilized men, not animals. Delgado was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the table. Then he said something that made Victor's blood run cold. "I know Elena Wick." The room went deadly silent. "What?" Victor's voice was barely a whisper. "Her brother, Thomas. He wasn't caught in random crossfire." Delgado's face was stone, but his eyes held genuine anguish. "He was my nephew. My sister's only son. He was walking home from a summer job at a clinic when your men and mine started shooting at each other over a shipment dispute. A bullet from one of your guns killed him." The world tilted. Victor felt like he'd been punched in the chest, right where his surgical incision throbbed. "No. That's not." July 15th, 3 years ago. Chicago. Your crew was muscle for the Ortiz family then, before you broke away and came to New York. Delgado pulled out his phone, showed Victor a photo, a teenager with Elena's eyes and smile, wearing a clinic volunteer shirt. "That's Thomas. That's my nephew. The boy your war killed." Victor couldn't breathe. Elena's brother. The loss that shaped her, the grief that made her so fierce about stopping violence. And Victor's organization, his ambition, his need for power, had pulled the trigger. "Does she know?" Victor managed. "That it was my people." The police report listed it as gang violence, no specific attribution. Chicago PD doesn't waste resources investigating gang casualties. Delgado's voice was bitter. "But I know. I've known who you were since you first moved into New York. Been waiting for the right moment to make you pay." Dimitri's hand moved toward his jacket, but Victor stopped him with a look. "Then why are you here?" Victor asked. "Why not just kill me and call it justice?" Delgado's laugh was hollow. "Because my sister, Thomas's mother, made me promise something before she died last year. Cancer, like it runs in our family. She made me swear I'd stop the violence. Said losing Thomas to gang wars was destroying her, but knowing I'd die the same way would kill her twice." His eyes glistened. "So I promised. And unlike you, Corleone, I keep my promises to family." The revelation crashed through Victor like a tidal wave. He'd been so focused on his own redemption, his own change, that he hadn't considered the intricate web of pain he'd created. Elena had saved the life of the man whose organization killed her brother. And now Victor sat across from that brother's uncle, trying to negotiate peace for a war that had already taken everything from both of them. "She doesn't know," Victor said quietly. "Elena doesn't know it was my people." "And you're not going to tell her, are you?" Delgado's smile was sharp. "Because then she'd see you for what you really are. A killer with a guilty conscience." "I'm going to tell her." The words came out firm, certain, even though they terrified him. "Because she deserves the truth. And because I'm done lying, to her, to myself, to everyone." Delgado studied him with new intensity. "You're serious? This whole peace thing, you really mean it? My people killed your nephew. Your flesh and blood. And you're still sitting here instead of putting a bullet in my head." Victor leaned forward despite the pain in his abdomen. "We're both trying to honor promises to women who believed we could be better than this life. So yes, I'm serious. The question is, are you?" The silence stretched like a wire-pulled taut. Finally, Delgado extended his hand across the table. "North docks for me. South for you. Neutral zones on 5th and Lexington. Any disputes go through the Marconi family as arbitrators. They're neutral and profit from both of us staying alive. We try this for 6 months. If it works, we expand. If it doesn't..." He shrugged. "We revisit." Victor shook his hand, feeling the weight of it. "Deal." "And Delgado?" "I'm sorry. For Thomas. For your sister. For all of it. It doesn't fix anything, but you deserve to hear it." "You're right. It doesn't fix anything." Delgado stood, buttoning his jacket. "But maybe it's a start. Tell Elena. Tell her Thomas would have liked that she saved the life of a man trying to change. He believed people could be better. Guess we're both trying to prove him right." After Delgado left with his men, Dimitri exhaled loudly. "Boss, that was the hardest thing I've ever done," Victor finished. "And it's about to get harder. I have to tell Elena the truth." "You sure that's wise? She might hate me. Refuse to see me. Never forgive me." Victor stood slowly, pain shooting through his abdomen. But she asked me to be honest. To really change. And change starts with owning what you've done, no matter the cost. The drive back to the hospital felt like a march to execution. Victor's mind raced with what he'd say, how he'd tell her, whether she'd even let him finish speaking before walking out of his life forever. When he reached his room, Elena was waiting, out of her scrubs, wearing jeans and a soft sweater, her hair down for the first time. She'd brought actual food from outside the hospital, the kind of thoughtful gesture that made Victor's heart ache. "You're back." She smiled, then saw his face. "What happened? Did the meeting go badly?" It worked. We made peace. Delgado and I have a deal." "Victor, that's amazing." She moved toward him, then stopped, reading his expression. "Then why do you look like someone died?" Victor sat on the edge of his bed, his whole body feeling heavy. "Elena, there's something I need to tell you. About Thomas. About how he died." He watched her face change, confusion giving way to caution, caution giving way to fear. "What about Thomas?" And Victor Corleone, a man who'd faced down rival gangs and federal prosecutors without flinching, found his voice breaking as he said, "It was my people. My organization. 3 years ago in Chicago, my crew was part of the shooting that killed your brother. I didn't know until today, but it doesn't matter. It was my war. My ambition. My gun that took him from you." Elena's face went white. The food container slipped from her hands, splattering across the floor. She stared at him like he was a stranger. No, worse, like he was exactly who she'd always feared he might be. "You." She couldn't seem to finish the sentence. "I'm so sorry," Victor whispered. "Elena, I'm so." "Get out." Her voice was ice. "Please, let me explain." "Get out." She screamed it this time, tears streaming down her face. "You killed my brother. You took the only family I had left, and I saved your life. I stayed by your bedside. I believed you could change. I am changing. That's why I'm telling you." "No, you're confessing because you got caught. Because Delgado told you." She was shaking now, rage and grief warring on her face. "How many others, Victor? How many other brothers and sisters and sons have you killed building your empire?" Victor had no answer. No defense. Because she was right. "I want you out of this hospital," Elena said, her voice dropping to something worse than anger, cold, absolute finality. "Transfer to another facility. I don't care where. But I never want to see you again." She walked out, leaving Victor alone with the scattered food and the wreckage of whatever had been building between them. And for the second time in a week, Victor Corleone felt like he was dying. But this time, no surgery could fix what was broken. Victor transferred to a private recovery facility the next morning. Dr. Gatsby arranged it quietly, professionally, though his disappointment was evident. Dimitri handled the logistics while Victor sat in silence, staring at nothing. The new facility was luxurious, private suite, attentive staff, everything money could buy. It felt like a prison. For 3 days, Victor barely spoke. He took his medications, attended his follow-up appointments, and lay in bed replaying the look on Elena's face when he'd told her the truth. The hatred. The betrayal. The absolute finality in her voice. His empire ran smoothly without him. Dimitri reported that the Delgado piece was holding, no incidents, no conflicts. The crew was adjusting. Business was actually improving with the reduced tension. Victor didn't care. "Boss, you gotta eat something," Dimitri said on day 4, bringing in food Victor wouldn't touch. "You're healing. You need strength." "For what?" Victor's voice was hollow. "For living. For the change you said you wanted to make." "I killed her brother, Dimitri." Victor finally looked at his second-in-command. "The woman who saved my life, who believed I could be better. I took the person she loved most. What's the point of changing if I've already destroyed the only good thing that's happened to me in 15 years? Dimitri sat heavily in a chair. "You told her the truth. That took courage." "Courage?" Victor laughed bitterly. "I destroyed her. Again. First, my organization killed Thomas. Then I made her care about me, made her hope, just to rip it away with the truth. She'd have been better off if I'd died on that operating table." "Don't say that." "Why not? It's true." Victor turned away. Leave me alone, Dmitri. Meanwhile, across the city, Elena wasn't doing much better. She'd called in sick for her shifts, something she never did. Her small apartment felt suffocating, every corner reminding her of Thomas. His graduation photo on the mantel. His acceptance letter to pre-med programs, framed like the treasure it had been. She'd saved Victor Corleone's life. Stayed by his bedside. Started to believe in him, started to feel something dangerous and real. And all along, his hands were stained with her brother's blood. Her friend and fellow nurse, Sarah, brought over coffee on the second day. You want to talk about it? I fell for a man who killed my brother, Elena said numbly. What's there to talk about? Did he pull the trigger himself? Does it matter? It was his war, his people, his ambition that put bullets in the air. Sarah was quiet for a moment. You told me once that Thomas wouldn't want you to carry hate forever. That he'd want you to heal. Thomas is dead because of men like Victor Corleone. Elena's voice cracked. And I she couldn't finish. Almost loved him. Almost believed in him. Almost thought she could have something beautiful with a man whose empire was built on her grief. But at night, alone in her bed, Elena couldn't stop thinking about the look on Victor's face when he'd told her. The genuine anguish. The fact that he'd told her at all, knowing it would destroy whatever was building between them. He could have lied. Could have kept the secret. But he'd chosen honesty over happiness. Wasn't that the change she demanded? The thought made her angry at herself. At him. At the universe for being so impossibly complicated. On the fifth day, something unexpected happened. Rafael Delgado appeared at Victor's recovery facility. How'd you find me? Victor asked, not really caring. I'm still a gang leader, Corleone. Finding people is what we do. Delgado sat uninvited. You look worse than when you were dying. What do you want? To tell you something about my nephew. About Thomas. Delgado pulled out his phone, showing Victor a video. My sister recorded this a month before Thomas died. Watch. Victor didn't want to, but something made him look. The video showed a teenage boy, Thomas, sitting at a kitchen table, talking animatedly to the camera. Mom, I'm serious. Thomas's voice was bright, full of life. I don't care if Uncle Raphael is in the life. I don't care if he's made mistakes. People can change. Look at Mr. Rodriguez from the clinic. He was in a gang, and now he's saving lives. That's who I want to be. Someone who proves people can be better. The video ended. Victor felt tears burning his eyes. Thomas believed people could change, Delgado said quietly. Even people like us. My sister played this video at his funeral, and I thought she was naive. Thought he was naive. But then you sat across from me, looking half dead, and offered peace. Actually meant it. He paused. Elena saved your life because that's who she is. But you told her the truth because that's who you're becoming. Thomas would have respected that. She hates me, Victor whispered. Yeah, she does. Right now. Delgado stood. But hate isn't the opposite of love, Corleone. Indifference is. She's hurting because she cared. The question is, do you give up on becoming better because it's hard? Or do you prove that her brother was right about people being able to change? After Delgado left, Victor sat in silence for a long time. Then he called Dmitri. I need you to set something up. Elena was leaving the grocery store when she saw them, 3 young men in gang colors, arguing with a teenager who looked terrified. The kid couldn't have been more than 16, clutching a backpack and trying to back away. Her nurse instincts and her rage both flared. She marched over. Leave him alone. The gang members looked at her with amusement. Lady, mind your business. He is my business. All of you are. Elena's voice shook with fury. At them, at Victor, at the whole violent world. You think you're tough? You think this makes you strong? You're just creating more orphans, more grieving sisters. You're destroying lives for what? Territory? Money? Respect? Elena. The voice came from behind her. She spun to see Victor, leaning heavily on a cane, Dmitri beside him. He looked terrible, pale, thinner, but his eyes were clear and determined. What are you doing here? She demanded. These are my guys, Victor said quietly. Then louder, To the young men, back off. Now. But boss, he's wearing Delgado colors. I don't care if he's wearing a tutu and singing opera. You don't touch him. We have peace with Delgado, which means his people and ours coexist. Is that clear? The gang members looked confused but nodded and left. The teenager fled immediately. Elena stared at Victor, emotions warring inside her. You can't just show up, Anne. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Victor interrupted. I don't deserve that. But I need you to know I'm trying. Really trying. He pulled out his phone, showed her something. This is the Thomas Wick Foundation. I'm funding it with 1/4 of my assets. Scholarships for kids who want to go into medicine. Community clinics in high-violence areas. Gang intervention programs. Elena's hand trembled as she looked at the website, professional and real. You can't buy forgiveness. I'm not trying to. I'm trying to honor your brother's memory. Thomas believed people could change. I'm proving he was right. Why? Her voice broke. Why does it matter what I think? Victor stepped closer, wincing at the pain. Because you're the only person who ever saw me as someone worth saving. And even though I don't deserve you, will never deserve you, I need to become the man you believed I could be. Even if you hate me forever. Tears streamed down Elena's face. I don't hate you, Victor. That's the problem. I should hate you. You killed my brother. Your world took everything from me. But you told me the truth when you didn't have to. You chose honesty over happiness. And Thomas. She sobbed. Thomas always said people deserved second chances. Elena. I need time, she said firmly. I need time to figure out how to reconcile the man who killed my brother with the man who's trying to honor his memory. Can you give me that? As much as you need, Victor promised. I'll wait forever if that's what it takes. 2 months passed. Victor threw himself into transformation. The Thomas Wick Foundation opened its first clinic in Chicago, in the neighborhood where Thomas had died. The peace with Delgado expanded. Other families joined, creating what the media called an unprecedented truce in organized crime. Victor attended his recovery appointments religiously. Went to therapy, actual therapy, to deal with the guilt and the violence of his past. Started redirecting his resources toward legitimate businesses. He wasn't clean, wasn't a saint, but he was different. And he waited for Elena. She saw his efforts. The foundation made news, scholarships awarded to dozens of kids. The clinic treated thousands of patients. Victor's name appeared not in crime reports but in philanthropy columns. But she still couldn't bring herself to contact him. Until one day, 3 months after their confrontation, she received a call from the foundation. One of the scholarship recipients wanted to meet her. The girl's name was Maria, 16 years old, and she wanted to be a trauma surgeon. Because of your brother, Maria explained when they met at a cafe. Mr. Corleone told us about Thomas. About how he believed in people changing. I was going to join my cousin's gang because we needed money, but this scholarship, it gave me a different path. Elena listened to Maria talk about her dreams, her hopes, her determination to break the cycle of violence in her family. And she realized, this was Thomas's legacy. Not his death, but his belief in redemption. That evening, Elena found herself at Victor's building. Dmitri let her up without question, like he'd been expecting her. Victor was on his balcony, looking out at the city. He turned when he heard her, shock and hope and fear crossing his face. Elena. I met Maria today, she said. From the foundation. She's remarkable. Reminds me of your brother, that determination to heal instead of hurt. Elena stepped closer. I've been so angry at you. For what you did, for what your world cost me. But then I see girls like Maria, and I think about what Thomas would say. He'd tell me that punishing you forever doesn't bring him back. It just creates more pain. I don't expect forgiveness. Good. Because I'm not sure I can fully forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Elena's voice was steady but her eyes were wet. But Victor, I've spent 3 months watching you change. Really change. Not performatively, not for show, but genuinely becoming someone different. And Thomas believed people could do that. How can I honor his memory by refusing to believe in the very thing he died believing? Victor's hands were shaking. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to try. To see if we can build something real from all this broken history. It won't be easy. Some days I'll look at you and see the man whose empire killed my brother. But other days. She took his hand. Other days I'll see the man who died and came back determined to be better. The man who told the truth knowing it would destroy us. The man who's spending his fortune honoring a boy he never met. Elena, Victor breathed her name like a prayer. I love you. I've loved you since you threatened to slap sense into me. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of even a fraction of your faith. Then prove it, she said. Not with grand gestures or foundations, though those matter. Prove it by choosing to be better every single day. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Victor pulled her close, careful of his still healing body, and kissed her. It was gentle, reverent, full of promise and pain and hope all tangled together. I will, he whispered against her lips. Every single day. The Thomas Wick Foundation's second annual gala was packed. Donors, scholarship recipients, community leaders, and, surprisingly, both Corleone and Delgado family members, all gathered to celebrate the program that had changed hundreds of lives. Victor stood at the podium, no longer the commanding crime lord but a man humbled by his past and determined about his future. Elena sat in the front row beside Rafael Delgado and his family, a strange alliance born from shared loss and shared hope. 3 years ago, a boy named Thomas Wick died because of gang violence, Victor began. He was 17, brilliant, kind, and believed that people could change. His death was a direct result of the world I helped create, a world where territory and money mattered more than human life. The room was silent, hundreds of eyes on him. I can't bring Thomas back. I can't undo the damage I've caused. But I can honor his belief in redemption by proving he was right. This foundation isn't about my guilt or my legacy. It's about making sure no more kids die before they get the chance to become the doctors, the teachers, the healers they're meant to be. Applause filled the room, but Victor's eyes were only on Elena. She smiled, complicated, bittersweet, but real. After the speeches, Victor found her on the balcony overlooking the city. The same city where they'd both lost so much and somehow found each other. You did well, Elena said. Thomas would have liked your speech. You think so? I know so. She leaned against him, and Victor wrapped his arm around her waist. 6 months together now. 6 months of therapy sessions and difficult conversations and learning how to love someone while carrying the weight of what you've done. It wasn't easy. Some days Elena still saw her brother's face and couldn't look at Victor. Some days Victor's old instincts surfaced, and he had to consciously choose peace over violence. But they were trying. Together. Raphael told me something interesting, Elena said. He's starting a similar foundation. The Delgado Peace Initiative. He said if you could change, he could too. Victor smiled. Thomas's legacy keeps growing. It does. Elena turned to face him, her hands on his chest where a scar marked his second chance at life. You know what I realized? Thomas didn't die believing people could change. He died knowing they could, because that's how much faith he had in humanity. We're not proving him right, we're fulfilling what he already knew was true. You're extraordinary, Victor said softly. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into hope for hundreds of kids. Your brother would be so proud. He'd be proud of you too, Elena replied. The man who had everything and gave it up for something better. I didn't give up everything. Victor kissed her forehead. I found everything that actually matters. Inside, the gala continued, scholarship recipients sharing their stories, donors writing checks, families who'd been enemies now working together towards something larger than their old wars. The city outside sparkled with lights, each one a life continuing, a story unfolding, a possibility waiting to be realized. Victor Corleone had entered a hospital as a dying king and emerged as a living man. He'd lost his empire but gained his soul. He'd faced his worst crimes and chosen to transform them into hope. And beside him stood Elena Wick, the nurse who'd threatened to slap sense into him and instead loved him into becoming someone worth saving. You know what's funny? Elena said, a genuine laugh in her voice. I told you slapping you would make your sickness leave your body. You were right, Victor replied. You slapped me with the truth, and it cured the sickness I didn't even know I had. The disease of believing power mattered more than people. So I'm an excellent nurse, The best, Victor agreed. You saved my life twice, once on that operating table, and once when you walked into my room and saw me as someone worth fighting for. Elena kissed him then, tender and fierce all at once, a kiss that tasted like grief and forgiveness and futures that hadn't been written yet. Behind them, through the windows, they could see Maria and the other scholarship recipients laughing together, planning their careers, their lives unburdened by the violence that had taken Thomas. It didn't erase the past. Nothing could. But it transformed it into something that mattered. Something that would outlive them all. And as Victor held Elena close, surrounded by the evidence that change was possible and redemption was real, he understood something profound. The truest power wasn't in commanding fear. It was in earning love. And finally, after 15 years of being a king, Victor Corleone had learned how to be simply, beautifully, imperfectly human. We have come to the end of the story. Thank you for watching to the end. Share your opinion about this story in the comments below. I like getting feedback from my audience. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our heartwarming stories.